So once again, welcome to my home seller webinar. By the way, even though I do call it the first time home seller webinar, it's really for any home seller. Um, hey Mala, we're just getting rolling. Because especially in 2021, my gosh, so many things have changed. It's a truly unique market as well. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. So it's really, this webinar is for any home seller, and it's all about the market of the moment and how to really maximize your equity as a seller. Because when you are about to sell a home, when you do sell your home, I look at it as that opportunity to reap the rewards of all that equity that you have earned over the years of ownership. So it's a really big deal, and you really want to take that opportunity and make the most of it that you can, right? And so that's what my job is. I'm a listing agent mostly. I do work with buyers as well, but I'm sort of like 80-20 listings. And I like to specialize in working on the seller side. And so my job, as I see it, is to help those sellers, again, really earn the most that they can and be able to accomplish their next level to as much as they, the highest degree that they can after selling that home. So before we get into the content of the presentation, I would like to just open it up and give you all an opportunity to tell me what your questions are. If you have any questions that you came here with that you're hoping to get the answers to, I'd love to know what they are and make sure that we cover them. So I know a lot of times Q&A is at the end of a presentation, but again, I just really want to hear if there's anything that you desire to hear about today specifically. And if not, that's fine. I'll tell you what I hear usually from sellers, and we'll cover those points. But feel free, if you want to jump in the chat or unmute yourself, feel free to let me know.
Hi, Carrie. I do have a question.
Yes.
I'm in the process of selling my parents' house in New Jersey, and I don't know if this is a different state thing, but they gave us, to get the certificate of conformity, they gave us a laundry list, which was primarily cosmetic items, and I just wonder if that's something that's typical. And there's a penalty of $2,000 per day if they weren't done within 3 weeks. So I'm just not sure if that's something that's just typical to New Jersey, or if that's just something that is normal when you're trying to sell a home.
When you say they, who gave you
The
the
city,
list?
the city came out, they did an inspection to get the certificate of occupancy. Here they call it certificate of conformity.
Okay.
And they just gave us a laundry list of things. Some included like adding a handrail here or there, but there were others like putting on pipe collars and painting inside a closet. And,
Wow.
yeah, it was ridiculous. So I just wondered if that's something that I should expect here in Massachusetts, or
No,
no.
that's definitely not typical in Massachusetts.
Yeah, it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
So
Is it a single family or a condo?
it's a single family home.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question to you, Yvonne?
Sure.
Is it normal in New Jersey to have the home inspected by the city before you sell the property?
Yes. So I've never sold in Massachusetts before, so I don't know, but I have a condo in Massachusetts.
Yeah, you wouldn't need a certificate of occupancy here to sell
Oh,
unless it
really?
was a new construction home.
Oh, yeah, no, this home is 100 years old.
Actually, it varies by town, but most towns, anywhere that I've dealt with, you do not need that unless it's a new construction home.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that is, yeah.
So I just have one more question for you, Yvonne.
Sure.
I presume you have a real estate agent supporting you?
Yes.
And they are the ones who advised you to get inspection by the city?
Yes, it has to be done in New Jersey. You have to have You have to have a certificate of occupancy to buy a house.
Huh. Okay.
Buy a house, you need to have a certificate of occupancy, or some towns call it certificate of occupancy, some call it certificate of conformity. But the town where my parents' house is, it's a certificate of conformity, and it's cosmetic and any
Wow,
like hazard, like handrails and that sort of thing.
that is really interesting how different it can be from state
Mm-hmm.
to state.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Wow, yeah, and
It was a
especially
night.
where it's very cosmetic, that's really
Right.
kind
Plus
of
a
strange.
$2,000 per day fine for if everything wasn't completed. So we're getting around it by doing a bunch of items and just trying to get a temporary certificate of occupancy.
Okay.
But then it falls on the buyer to complete everything within 6 months, whereas I had 2 weeks to get everything done, and it was just impossible.
Wow.
So the buyer, it now falls on the buyer to complete everything in 6 months. But it's, again, the stuff that they're being left with is primarily cosmetic, touch up paint, that sort of thing. It's ridiculous.
Well, good luck with that.
Thank you. Thank you.
For those of you who are just joining us, I'm just asking if people have any burning questions up front to make sure that we address, that I address those during the presentation. So yeah, if there is anyone else that has a question pertaining to selling a home, please do speak up. Either now or during, I don't mind interactive format. So I would thank you for your questions. Absolutely. Anyone else have a question before we move on? All right. Okay, well, thank you, Yvonne. I appreciate your question, and Molly, I appreciate your interaction as well. And we'll get started, but again, I do encourage your questions as we move forward. I would love that. Oh, Yvette said, do you walk through a home and suggest items that should be updated or fixed before you put the house on the market? Yes, I do. Actually, I'm doing that later today for a client in Wakefield. And I always let people know too that, especially, so right now in Massachusetts, and I think in most of the states across the country, it's a very hot seller's market, very hot. I actually just pulled some of the stats year to date, and the inventory is 60% lower than it was at this time last year, as far as single families. So we had 6,433 single family units available on the market at this time last year, February 23rd. And this year, we only have 2,585 single families in all of Massachusetts that are available on the market. That's a 60% drop. And so you may have heard how hot the market is, and that's the biggest reason why. That and the interest rates being the way they are, they're still incredibly low, sometimes in the twos or the low threes, depending on, you know, what kind of mortgage product it is. And that's driving the market. So the reason I'm saying this now is because as a seller, you really don't have to do anything. Luckily in Massachusetts, you don't have to get a certificate of occupancy or have an inspection. And so you can sell any home. I can sell any home as is. And yet, yes, there are things that you may be able to do that could elevate your sales price, that would get you more bang for the buck. So that would be a good investment for you as a seller. And I actually also have a program, I call it the Found Equity Program, where I offer an interest-free loan to home sellers to do some of those kinds of updates. And they're typically cosmetic, you know, kinds of things in the kitchen, bath, or you know, other things that buyers are looking for in this market that will increase your sale price and increase your showability. And therefore, that will, and then it's payable back at closing, but there's no interest to be paid on it, and it benefits you, it benefits the buyer. And so it's truly a win-win. Your house will sell quicker and those kinds of things. So long story short, yes, Yvette, I do offer a walkthrough free of charge to help with upgrading the home and I'll let you know different options that are available pertaining to your budget or when you want to sell. And we could also talk about the found equity program too. So thank you for asking that. And Elaine Varney said, I'm in the state of Maine. Maine has agents both for the seller and the buyer. Do you know if of any other states area that have this 2-agent requirement? Well, Elaine, in Massachusetts, we have listing agents and buyer agents as well. And so I encourage all buyers to have a buyer's agent rather than just go through the listing agent. It's better because, at least in Massachusetts, agents, when you have a contract with your agent, you have a fiduciary relationship with them, meaning that your agent has a legal and an ethical responsibility to protect your best interests as the seller or the buyer. And so, for example, sometimes buyers think they can save money by going straight to the listing agent and not using a buyer's representative. And yet that listing agent is obligated because they have that fiduciary relationship with their client, the seller. So they're obligated to act in the best interests of the seller. That means that they're not going to tell you things that might potentially hurt their seller's leverage in the negotiation. They can hold back information unless it's like a legal disclosure they have to make, but they're going to, at any, cost, they're going to protect the interests of their seller. And so therefore, I always recommend that a buyer and a seller each have their own agent representing their best interests. So I hope that answers your question. But yeah, it's not a requirement. Anyone can sell a home if they choose to without an agent, and anyone can buy a home without an agent. But having an excellent, reputable agent protect you during this very important transaction, has a lot of benefits. You can save money, you can make more money as a seller, you can protect yourself legally because our brokerages have errors and omissions insurance, so there's less liability as both a seller and a buyer. And so these are some of the reasons that you would want to have somebody representing you. Also, third-party negotiation goes a long way. You don't want to be handling hundreds of thousands of dollars of your own money in a negotiation. Even if you're a professional negotiator, it's such high stakes. It's always good to have someone who's a third party at an arm's length from the transaction who stays cool as a cucumber during that negotiation, if that makes sense. So thank you. And then Elaine, you said, what is the term for selling your home with the stipulation that the new owners allow you to occupy your home until your death? Okay, let me read that again. What is the term for selling your home with a stipulation that the new owners allow you? Okay, so that sounds like a rental agreement while you're living, right? So most commonly that's with a family relationship. So for example, a parent might, sell or transfer the deed to the home to a child of theirs or a family member of theirs, but they can remain living there and, for the term of their life until they die. So that would be the term. It would be until they pass away. So I'm not sure if that's what you mean. I haven't heard of this happening in a non-family situation. I've only really seen this happen again in like a inheritance or family situation.
That's what I meant, inherited in the family.
Yes. Okay. So the term would be the remainder of the life of the parent. Unless something else is, worked out by the lawyer, but that's typically how that works. Or, maybe it would be until they're no longer able to live alone and they might need to go to assisted living or something like that. But typically those things are worked out with the assistance of a lawyer. So if that's something you're dealing with, definitely make sure you have a good lawyer working with you. Great. Well, again, if there's more questions going forward, please don't be shy. I do love questions. I don't like to just talk to myself. So I love the questions. Thank you guys. So I just wanted to tell you a little bit about me. If you don't know me yet, I'm a full-time realtor. I work with Keller Williams Realty in the Cambridge, Massachusetts office. However, I service all of Greater Boston up to the North Shore. I do most of my business by referral. So I pretty much go where the referrals take me. I'm very mobile. And I've been in real estate full-time for over 10 years now. And like I already mentioned, I do specialize in working with sellers. And so basically, my team is Big Picture Realty, and that is due to my philosophy that any real estate transaction is actually, has a bigger picture around it. It usually represents a major transition in someone's life. It could be a first home, or, because of a new baby, or a death in the family, or a new job. So I like to find out more about the context of the real estate transaction and really be a consultant and an advisor to my clients rather than just a sales agent. So that's what that team name is about. And ironically, when I got into real estate, it was due to the first sale of my first home. So I just wanted to tell you a quick story. So this is me and my husband back in Los Angeles 11 years ago now. We had lived there for 4 years, and we were both working towards a career in filmmaking. I was actually working for a talent agency in Beverly Hills, and we got pregnant clearly with our first baby. And shortly after having that baby, I realized, gosh, what are we doing in LA when all of our family is back in the Northeast? As well as I was working 9 to 7 with this talent agency. So we both decided to make a major life transition, move cross country, and start new careers. Well, as you can imagine, so we just bought this condo not even a year before that, and we'd done some fixing up on it, and now we were turning around and going to sell it. As you can imagine, it was very stressful. There was a lot of changes happening. And so thankfully we had an amazing agent. She happened to be Keller Williams as well. And I really found out firsthand the importance of having that kind of person to lean into, that expert hand to guide through the transaction. And when it looked like it was actually a really bad market, it was 2010. And so the market was really in the dumps. And it looked like we weren't going to sell for a bit there, and it got very stressful. But she helped us prep the condo, stage it a little bit more, and helped us advise on the price. And eventually it sold, and we were able to make our move successfully. So anyway, that's just a quick anecdote, because I know firsthand how stressful it can be to sell and move. And so that's why I enjoy doing that for my clients today. And that did get me into real estate, right? So it was a big deal. So some of the most frequently asked questions that I hear today and over the past 10 years, frankly, from my clients are, we're going to look at those right now. And here's the one that I hear all the time. It's, when is the best time to sell? And it's interesting because especially here in New England, we tend to think, well, there's a spring market and there's a fall market, right? And it's just sort of a tradition. It's sort of a tradition. We think about, well, all the houses look so pretty in the spring, and all the buyers come out and look and go to open houses. And then in the fall, the trees, and the leaves turn colors and all that. And yet, it's really just tradition that's rooted in, because we have buyers every day of the year in this market. I will, tell you honestly, if it's Christmas Day, if it's New Year's Day, if it's July, there are buyers out there. The thing that tends to prevent more sales volumes from happening during those quote unquote off times is just the fact there's less listings available. And so the best time to sell, if you really think about it logically, is actually, it's all due to supply and demand. So when there's less competition, and that would mean during those off times. So not the spring and fall, but actually the winter and the summer. Now, are there more buyers out in the spring and fall? Well, possibly, yes, but I would argue a lot of them are actually looky-loos. They're not necessarily motivated buyers. They're out because the weather is nice and they are thinking about it, but they might not even be pre-approved yet. And they may be just kicking tires. You don't know. And so you'll get more bodies in the door, but will the price be better? Not necessarily, because you're not even going to get more offers or necessarily better offers. So, for example, Warren Buffett is famous for saying zig when others zag. The best time to sell, I mean, is definitely when you have less competition. So, if you're thinking about it for this year, I would argue right now is the best time to sell, because as I just mentioned, the competition is incredibly low, 60% lower than it was last year. And also for single families, due to the fact that there's such low inventory and the interest rates are so low, the average sale price is almost 19% higher than it was last year. And that just goes to show you the effect of supply and demand. So right now we have low supply, high demand. Now, as the vaccine starts rolling out more and is more generally available, and as we move closer to the spring and things open up again, we're expecting an influx of more inventory. And it just makes sense that all that pent up demand of people waiting for the storm to kind of pass by, COVID situation, they're going to start coming to the market. And so we're going to see this boom of pent up demand coming through. And all of a sudden, there's going to be 10 more houses just like yours that are available in your neighborhood, whereas right now there are none. So buyers will have more choices. And so that will soften prices. And it's just a natural correction that happens in the market. Again, just goes back to supply and demand. So if you want to beat the competition, I would say do it sooner rather than later, because the other thing is interest rates. We don't know how long they're going to hold this low. I mean, nobody knows. There's no way of telling. But we do know they're not going to get lower. They're only going to get higher. And as the economy stabilizes, that's probably when they're going to increase. So we have a great window of opportunity right now. We really do. And so that's all I really say about that. Now is the best time. We know that right now it's a great market. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. So that's where we are with that. And Elaine said, what a small world we live in. Cambridge, Massachusetts is my hometown where I grew up, and I'm a former member of SAG-AFTRA. Oh my gosh, that's awesome. That means you must be an actress, Elaine. Small world. I love it. All right, so another great question I get, what are the costs of selling? And yes, this will vary state to state. This is just a sample property though that I sold last year. And I always like to explain to home sellers what the costs are, because nobody likes surprises when it comes to costs of selling at the closing table. So I broke it down here based on the sale price of around $425 to $450. And the reason there's two numbers there is because when I do a consultation with a seller, I'll give them a range, right? Because market value, it varies. Market value is nothing but what a willing, able, and ready buyer is willing to pay for a specific property. And so we can't predict that to the dollar, and yet we can definitely give you a range to expect. And depending on, again, supply and demand, what competition you have, and what specific buyers are willing to pay at that moment, it could be, within that range or even a little bit higher. So within this range, you would obviously subtract the loan amount on your property if you have one, and that gives you your net equity here. And then the closing costs are, of course, the brokerage fee, which in my market usually ranges from like 3 to 6%. I think I've calculated in here like a 5% fee, and my own commission varies depending on what we need to do to sell the property. So I offer a tier a tiered commission, and I talked to my seller about what they would like, whether they'd like, you know, bare bones service or they'd like to the gold standard. So I leave it up to them. Then there's a smoke detector inspection, which is usually $25 per unit, but it does depend on the town. And so in Massachusetts, they require that the seller provides a smoke certificate, which certifies that the smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors in the home are operating properly and that they're in the right locations. And so every time a home is sold, the fire department comes in from that town and does that inspection and tests them all, and then provides, you know, assuming that they work and they're up to code, then provides the seller with that certificate. And there's a small fee for that. For my sellers, I coordinate that for them and take care of it. And I have a guy that comes in and checks them too, to make sure everything is where they should be, because they tend to change the codes like every year almost. The other thing, in Massachusetts, we are an attorney state. So you'll have an attorney who will draft and review the purchase and sale document for you. And they will also attend the closing for you and make sure that everything goes smoothly from tip to tail. With an attorney, make sure that you're working with a real estate attorney. They should specialize in real estate. I can't tell you how often I've had clients who have said, oh, you know, I have a uncle who does divorce, you know, law, or estate attorney in the family or whatever, or a friend of the family. They don't, you know, they're probably very good at what they do, but they don't do real estate every day. And just like you wouldn't go to a podiatrist for a toothache, you want to make sure you go to the right kind of lawyer, because there are sometimes things that come up that are very common in real estate, and yet someone who's not doing it every day wouldn't recognize it as common, and they might kill a deal because they're fighting a battle that shouldn't be fought, or they might miss something that they should have brought up as an issue. And so make sure you're working with a real estate specialist, and make sure that they work on a flat fee. You shouldn't be working with a lawyer for real estate who charges hourly. So they should offer you a flat fee, so you know ahead of time what you're paying. And usually I find it ranges from like 800 to 1500. So I have in here 1,000, that's sort of middle of the road. But it also could be more if, for example, they're attending the closing on your behalf. So if you're giving them power of attorney, which actually is recommended, especially in COVID times, because it reduces your liability. It's more convenient for you as a seller. And also, of course, it's safer with now during COVID for less people to be at the closing table. And then miscellaneous means like certain fees for courier fees, mortgage payoff or recording fees, maybe around $300. And then you have your stamps tax, which again is specific to Massachusetts, and it's a tax to a home seller anytime they sell a home. And it's calculated at $4.56 per $1,000 of sale price. So as you can see, for a home that's around $425 to $450, it's like $2,000. And so you have your total cost here, and then I always provide an estimate of the seller's proceeds before we even list the home, so they know what to expect. All right, so if any questions about that, let me know. Yvonne has wondered, what does a fire extinguisher need to be installed for the smoke detector inspection? No, for a single family home, no, not at least in Massachusetts. I know you're in New Jersey, so it could be different there, because that's definitely a state specific thing. So you'd want to talk to your local fire department perhaps, but at least around here, you don't need that. You just need to have the smoke detectors working, and they need to be in specific places. So for example, you need them at the top and bottom of each stairway, including the cellar, and you need them within 10 feet of all bedrooms, as well as, I believe, the kitchen as well, within 10 feet of the kitchen. But again, they tend to change over time. So we always have someone check them for you. One more question. How do you determine the best price to list the home? Great question. Well, we run a very thorough market analysis, and by what that means is we look at the comparable sales from the past 6 months, and they need to be comparable or the most comparable to the home in terms of location. So within half a mile to a mile radius, condition, and size. So if it's a single family home, we look at bedroom count and square footage mostly to determine what is most similar in size. And then some other different amenities come up like parking, whether it has a finished basement or, how many bathrooms and things like that, fenced-in yard. But the three major determinants are the size, location, and condition. And I create a market analysis. I make sure I find at least 3 to 5 good comparable solds. And then the other thing we look at is what is currently under agreement that's comparable and what is actually available on the market that's comparable. And that is your competition. And so using all those metrics, I determine a range that I think is marketable in this market. And then I ultimately let the seller decide where they want to be. Do they want to be toward the lower end of the range and probably have a huge bidding war? Or do they want to be the higher end and maybe have to, maybe get one offer or even have to wait a week or two to get an offer? So I kind of, it's a partnership. We figure it out together. But I will say that in this market, it's important to price. You don't want to overprice. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. All right, so I know in a hot market, a lot of times people will think to themselves, well, why do I even need a broker? Why can't I just throw it on Zillow and do it myself? And I just wanted to address that up front because there are some really good reasons to use a broker, even in a hot market. And I have them listed here. So here's a chart that Collateral Analytics did in 2017, which was also a hot market. It's been hot for a while, but even more so now. And it found that agent-driven sales are higher on average than for sale by owner sales. And the reason for that is that going back to the law of supply and demand, the more powerful your marketing is, the more exposure you'll get. And of course, what happens when more people want the same thing? Just like in an auction, the price goes up, right? And so the more exposure you get, the more people you have that are aware of the property and that will inevitably fall in love with the property and make offers on it. So for example, I had a seller client a few years ago, and it was actually a 2-family, and he had it on Zillow as a for sale by owner for 2 months and had gotten no offers. He'd gotten some showings, some calls on it, some interest, but nothing as a formal offer. So I eventually convinced him to list it with me, and I said, "Look, let's raise your asking price $25,000, and that will cover my fee, right? And I'll sell it for you, and the buyer will pay the fee because it's in your asking price already." So that's exactly what we did. We listed it, had professional photos done and everything, and did the whole package, and listed it $25,000 higher than he had it on Zillow for sale by owner. And we had 3 offers in the first weekend. They were all over asking. And one of them, you're not even gonna believe this, but it was $100,000 over asking. So can you imagine the fortune he would have left on the table if he had successfully sold on his own? That's what I'm talking about. It happens all the time. So the other factor is buyers, a lot of times, they don't trust for sale by owners. The real good buyers that you're looking for that are out there shopping for a home, they want to work with a broker because they feel more comfortable. They feel like it's a reputable brokerage. Like if there's a problem later on, they can go back to the broker. And like I said before, brokerages are covered by insurance for errors and omissions. So it's also less liability for the seller. And so with the right marketing, the right presentation, and more exposure, you are going to get more money for the property. And a lot of times people say, well, my neighbor's interested in the home. Well, that's great. I'm sure they are. And if they're interested, so are about a dozen other people going to be interested. We just have to get it out there. And so that's one reason to use a broker. Also, of course, we handle the entire transaction from tip to tail for you, so you can focus on your own life and your move without any surprises and less stress. And, you know, like I mentioned before, having that third party negotiator handle it for you is truly important, because when it comes to crunch time and you're negotiating over tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars, your largest asset that you most likely have, it becomes stressful and you can make poor decisions in that situation. Anybody can, we're human. And so even if you are a professional negotiator, it's really important to have that person who is the at arm's length from the transaction, who is guiding you through that and helping you make good decisions. And by the way, I bought a income property last year. I used an agent. I don't want to be the buyer and the agent. I want that third party consultant that I can really trust and lean into to help me. It's hard to be everything, right? This is another thing that comes up a lot is a lot of times if you're selling, you're also buying. And so people wonder how to handle that, and they don't want to be homeless and they don't want to carry two mortgages at the same time, which is understandable. So the way that I look at it, so again, it is a hot market right now. And yes, when the home goes on the market, the goal is to have it sold really fast. And it should sell fast if it's priced right. However, the transaction itself takes 30 to 60 days or 45 to 60 days. So that's typically a couple of months right there. You also have probably 30 days to prepare the home for the market in most cases. So that's about 90 days. And then the new owner, the buyer, legally can have up to 60 days to move into the home after the closing if they have a mortgage. So if they get a mortgage, the mortgage company wants them to move in within 60 days of taking ownership, right? So that is actually, when you add it all up, that's 5 months that you, the seller, would have to locate your next home. So a lot of times I think sellers think, oh my God, I'm going to sell and I'm going to be homeless. Well, you have 5 months inherently. Now, if you want more time to find your next home, we can also make the sale contingent on your finding a home that you deem suitable. And that's something I've done successfully many times, where we write into the listing that the sale is completely contingent on the seller finding a suitable home. And buyers don't mind. They'll be flexible with you. Why? It's a hot market. And they want a home. So they're going to, I mean, right now buyers are doing everything. They're waiving every contingency in the book. They're going way over asking. They're writing love letters. They're doing everything they can to secure a home. And so they're not going to mind giving you some extra flexibility in order to make sure that they get the home. And so what you want to do is do exactly that. You want to list your home. If you want to make it contingent on finding a suitable home, do so. And then when your home is under agreement, when you have an accepted offer, then you want to go out and shop for your new home. Because with that accepted offer in writing, you're going to be a much stronger buyer than you would be if you just went out and said, oh, I still have to sell my home, but I'm going to make an offer on your house. No seller is going to even entertain that. And so have your home under agreement and then go and fall in love with a home that you can actually purchase. You don't want to put the cart before the horse. So that's worked really, really well with my clients in the past, and that's what I would advise. And as I put in here, you call it a UNO, or use and occupancy, when you do take that extra 60 days after closing to continue living in your property or in your old property, your former home. You rent it back from the new owner, from the buyer, for up to 60 days. So that is called a use and occupancy, or a UNO. All right, so moving on. Here is an overview of the listing timeline. So again, I do offer consultations where I walk through the property and help advise on anything that might be done to increase the value of the home. And again, it could be nothing. It could be just fine the way it is. And you don't necessarily have to do anything. But sometimes there might be little updates or touch-ups that could help show better and sell faster and potentially get more money. I also am offering the Found Equity program, where I'll offer an interest-free loan to a seller if they'd like, and we can do some cosmetic upgrades around the house that I know buyers are looking for, and that can help boost your sale value as well. So it's great to come in. There's really, it's never too early to talk to an agent, to talk to me and have a consultation. It's free, there's no obligation. And it could help you prepare. Even if you're selling 2 years from now, there might be things you could do over those 2 years to help increase your home. So your home's value. So feel free to schedule that whenever. And if you are thinking of selling, soon, then we'll put some tentative dates in place for photography. So I'll have my professional photographer come in, and they do not only photos, but also floor plans and a virtual tour, which is perfect for COVID because it means less actual foot traffic in your home, because people will see it virtually online before they even make an appointment to come in, to make sure that it's truly a good fit for them. So that's kind of the first stage, the preparation stage. And Alan asked about the interest-free loan for cosmetic updates. Is it you or your broker? It is actually me personally that offers that service. So my team, Big Picture Realty, we're offering that service. So yeah, it sounds really good, and it is. But it's just another way that we help our home sellers increase their value, and again, sell quicker, take more money with them. And it's really great. But if you have any questions about that, let me know. And the second phase is the listing setup. So again, that's when we actually have the photographer come in, and by that time, it should be basically ready to show. So the photos get turned around in 24 hours. And during that time, I'll also send the seller a draft listing to review and make sure that everything is the way they want it. They help me with the descriptions. So they tell me their favorite things about the property, what they like about the location and the neighborhood. I make sure all of that gets into the description, and we put the final tweaks on the listing itself. And that's all in the listing setup period. And let's see, Alan, how is that set up in the contract? It's just set up that we decide on whatever amount is to be loaned. Basically, I pay for any of the updates that we decide will help the home's value. We have a contractor give an estimate, and they come in before it goes on the market and complete the updates. And then in the contract, it says that, that fund will be released back to me at the closing. So you never even have to, the seller never goes out of pocket at all. Yeah, so happy to talk more about it. So the listing setup, like I said, that usually takes, 24 to 48 hours to get all the media back, to get the draft finalized. And then we launch into the pre-marketing. The sign will be installed. We'll finalize the showing strategy, whether we're doing open houses, individual showings. All of that is a little bit more complicated right now with COVID, but we've managed to come up with some strategies that are safe and benefit the seller by getting the most exposure at the same time. So depending on, of course, if it's an occupied property and how convenient it is to get in over the weekend, we'll work together on that showing strategy. And of course, PPE is used and things like that. And I'm also happy to pre-qualify buyers before they show up in person. So we're only getting serious, well-qualified buyers in the home that are ready to make offers, not just looky-loos. And then we launch the listing. So it goes live on the MLS, and from the MLS, it goes to over 400 different websites. And that's because Keller Williams has that exposure already built in. So, Zillow, Trulia, Redfin, like Realtor.com, all the ones you can think of, plus 300 more. So the internet will be fully saturated. So everywhere the buyer looks online, they will find the listing, because that's where buyers are looking these days. I also do targeted social media campaigns, and I even talk to the neighbors. So I call around the neighborhood and ask them to share the video tour with their friends and family. And believe it or not, neighbors love to know what's going on in the neighborhood, and they love to have the chance to pick their new neighbor. So they're happy to share that information. And this way we just get even more exposure for your listing. And my goal is always to get the home sold, offer accepted, within 21 days at most. Really, the first week or two is where we get the most interest and the most excitement about the home. So we want to take advantage of that and make sure that we capitalize on all that buyer engagement, because the new hot listing on the market is what buyers are excited about. All right. And so post contract, so after we have an offer in hand and we have an agreement between the parties, we confirm the timing of the settlement or closing. There may or may not be an inspection. As I said, a lot of buyers are waiving that right now, but in some cases, there'll still be some form of inspection. Then the purchase and sale is usually a couple of weeks after an accepted offer. That's when we get the buyer's second deposit in escrow, and it kind of really secures the deal. And then if the buyer has a mortgage, which they typically do, there'll be an appraisal where the lender will hire a third-party appraiser to walk through the home and certify that the value of the home is what the buyer is paying for it. And that's sort of the last hurdle that we have to cross during the transaction. And then the buyer's attorney issues a closing disclosure, which states the funds that are going back and forth between the parties. So everything that the buyer is bringing to the table and everything that is on the seller's side in the form of expenses or the loan payoff and things like that. And then the net proceeds will be determined on that closing disclosure. And then the day before or the day of the closing, there'll be a final walkthrough. And that's when the buyer gets to visit the home one more time to make sure that everything is in the condition that they expect before the closing. And if there are any repairs that had to be made in the terms of the offer or the P&S, that would have to be done by the final walkthrough. And we already talked about the smoke inspection that would also happen within that time frame before closing as well. And the smoke certificate would be required at the closing. Any questions? No? Okay. Oh, what are some home improvements that you recommend would be the most bang for the buck? Well, just like you hear on the HGTV, it's usually kitchens and baths, especially kitchens. That's where you get the most bang for the buck. with buyers today. So yeah, sprucing up the kitchen, fresh paint goes a long way, a fresh coat of paint, and you want to use neutral, cool colors in general. That's what buyers today are looking for, not bright colors. As you can see, I like bright colors, but that's not going to appeal to most buyers. So fresh coat of paint, curb appeal, excuse me, like sprucing up your front door, a fresh mailbox, you know, things like that. Your landscaping in the front, and decluttering. Decluttering goes a really long way. Obviously, that's not really an improvement, but everyone can use some decluttering. So putting stuff in storage or just getting rid of it is huge, because you want buyers to really see the space itself and not your stuff, right? So getting rid of anything you can go without using for a couple of months is a great idea. And then other than that, it kind of depends on the home. So if there are things that look like they're deferred maintenance, that, you know, sometimes you get used to living in your home, you don't do things. Like a lot of times people will have had a leak from their roof and it's been fixed, but they never got around to painting that water stain. You want to get that done. Anything that looks like deferred maintenance, it's going to lead the buyers to believe that there's other things that need to be done, and it's going to make them nervous. So things like that. Replacing the filter in the HVAC system, buyers might check that, you know. So, and again, it's kind of a sign that the owners might have neglected the home. So replace the filter in the HVAC system. Have it be super clean. Get a professional cleaner. Wash the baseboards. Get into the corners, or have the cleaner do it. And also another big one is take down heavy drapes and let as much light in as you can. So replace them with sheers, or just leave them bare for the showing time. You might not want to do that in the bedrooms, but let as much light in as you can, because it makes the room seem bigger. And natural light just makes people feel good, and it helps. Also bringing in greenery, plants, things like that brings life into a room. But those are general. So other than that, I'd be happy to come in and take a look at the home. And there's often some easy, quick things that can be done to help it show better, not only in person, but also online. Because when you think about it, again, buyers are mostly looking online, and they're looking in this like tiny little box on their computer. So you really have to make the home pop in that tiny window and appeal enough to the buyer that they are willing to get out of their house and go and see the home in person. Here's just a quick testimonial from a recent client who bought and sold, and it went smoothly, and they liked that we were very communicative. I'm really big on communication, and always let people know what to expect, so they're not feeling blindsided. And so here's the biggest mistake sellers make, and it's understandable, and yet it's easy to prevent and avoid as well. Sellers will always want to overprice. But even ironically, even in such a hot market where, as I said, single families, average sale price right now in Massachusetts, it's like 90% higher than it was last year, which is insane. I mean, that kind of appreciation is just ridiculous. It's unheard of. And yet, even with this kind of market, you do not want to overprice. Why? Well, because the thing is, homes are selling so fast, right? So even if it's on for 2 weeks, your home already looks stale if it hasn't sold yet, because buyers have this expectation that if it's a great home, it's going to sell like that. And so again, you really want to catch that wave of interest right in the beginning and make sure you capitalize on it. And the moment that wave is gone, it's like those hot buyers have moved on to the next listing and they're not coming back. They've looked at yours and they're done. So the only other way to recapture them would be to do a price drop. So the whole ball game changes after that first week of showings. All of a sudden, it's like, what's wrong with the property? Why hasn't it sold? So again, make sure you price correctly. I think it was Johnny who asked earlier how to price a home. You're going to want an in-depth market analysis. And I always want my sellers to understand where the price is coming from. So we go through that together and I show them why I'm recommending the price that I am, so that we're both on the same page. And when we get offers and, we get into negotiations, they know why we're talking about this kind of price. And best case scenario, we get multiple bids. That's what my goal is, to bring you multiple bids so that you have a choice and you can basically create the offer that works for you in terms of timing, contingencies or lack thereof, and of course, the price and other terms that might be important to you as well. So, if you want to rent back for, to stay the extra 60 days in the property or up to 60 days, things like that. So you can basically be in the driver's seat and decide how you want to design that transaction. So definitely understand why you're pricing the way you are, and that it's a strategic price that will increase your chances of a great offer. And this is one thing to keep in mind, is that buyers, they start with a lower budget because everybody wants to save money. It's just natural. So they start at a lower budget, and then typically what happens is throughout the duration of their home search, their budget increases because they realize that to really get what they're looking for, they have to pay more. And then if they fall in love with a property, all of a sudden they find that they can afford more. They just, where there's a will, there's a way. So they figure it out. So if you price too high, you're effectively pushing away those buyers who are looking on the low end of their budget. And yet when you price a little lower than perhaps market value, you are opening it up to a larger pool of buyers. You're encouraging them to come in and encouraging them to make offers. Does that make sense? And by the way, you never are obligated to take an offer that you don't want to take. So I think a lot of times people think, well, if I put it on the market for a lower price, I can't increase the price and people are going to lowball me. Well, that's actually the opposite of what happens. What happens is you put it on the market and the market performs. So if you put it on lower than it's actually worth, people will just come in higher and they'll negotiate against themselves. So that is what is happening right now. And again, how long has it been on the market? That's the question buyers are asking right after they ask about the price. It's how long has it been on the market? And the reason they're asking that is because they want to know how much they can negotiate the price. And if it hasn't sold in 2 weeks, they already think they can lowball you. So make sure it sells in the first week. So we're about at the end here. Here are some of the takeaways as I see it. So again, price is your number one marketing tool, and make sure that you have a data-driven market analysis and a thorough understanding of the market to make your listing shine above the rest of the competition. So that's where the market analysis comes in, and you want to price strategically so that you stand out from the competition. And then presentation is important as well. You want to make sure you have a professional presentation that really shows off the best features of the house, and a very thorough listing description, so that and virtual tours, so that buyers really feel that they are comfortable making an offer quickly. Because if you want a bidding war that first weekend, you have to make sure you're providing enough information about the property that buyers don't have too many questions and they say, yeah, let's write an offer right now. And again, you only have, because buyers are looking online, you really just have this little tiny square on their computer to attract them and pull them in. So that has to be very powerful. And a consultative approach, I talked about how agents in Massachusetts have a fiduciary relationship with their agents. And so that means we protect your best interests at all costs, above our own interests. So make sure you have an agent that's not just in it for the one-time transaction, that is still going to be there for you even after the sale, and that puts the relationship first, and that you can really lean into during this time, because again, it can be stressful and you want to make sure that you have that trust. And then transparency and communication, so important. Just, I mean, it goes without saying, but you have to, again, feel comfortable that you always know what's going on, what to expect, and you know, just understanding the process and the negotiation and how to get to closing without any surprises. So Johnny had another question, way to handle work completed without permits. Okay, so as a seller, I'm assuming you're saying how to handle that. That's a great question. It really depends on the work. Yes, I did record the presentation, Nancy. So I will send that out to you guys. But yeah, it really depends on the work. It could be an issue if we're talking about major work, such as like a fully finished basement or an addition or something else that's major. If it's just something simple like replacing of a boiler or something like that, that might not be an issue. So it kind of depends on the scope of the work. Yeah, if it's major, you might want to be proactive and bring in the city before the sale and make sure that it's taken care of, because if not, it could blow up a deal when you have a buyer already under agreement, and that's not what you want, because the worst thing as a seller is to go back on the market right after you've been under agreement. You lose all that initial heat that you had when you were fresh on the market, and you probably have to then disclose things that you know, the reasons that you went back on the market. So buyers will say, why did you come back on the market? And we'll have to tell them. So even if it's a good reason, it's still not the situation you want to be in. You lose a lot of your leverage. So I would recommend finding out. Yeah, I can talk to you offline about that, about whether it's something that would potentially blow up a deal or not, in my experience. So if you want to shoot me a quick email, we can follow up on that, because it really kind of depends. Any other questions? I don't know what time it is. Let's see. It's only 1 o'clock, so that's good. We didn't go too far over. If there are any other questions, I would love to hear from you, either now or offline. You can feel free to send me an email or call me. That's my cell phone right there. 791-4882 is my cell phone, and would be happy to work up a market analysis for your home, and that way you would know what it's worth in this market, and it might be more than you think. So be happy to do that, or I would just love to learn more about your goals and what your thoughts are. It is a very unique market. So definitely interesting. It will be interesting to see how this year plays out. But right now, it's a fantastic time for sellers. It really is. If you're worried about where to go next, you know, I understand that's a perfectly reasonable concern. But again, you have probably 5 months or more if you'd like to look for a new home. And we do expect inventory to increase in the next month or two. So I hope this was helpful. And if there are no other questions, we'll wrap it up here. But do feel free to reach out, and I'll send you all the recording, as well as a seller's guide as well, with a little more helpful information. And if you want to talk one-on-one, please get in touch with me. We can do a Zoom, a virtual consult, or just a phone call, And I look forward to hearing more about your goals and your questions. So thank you guys for attending. I really appreciate your time, and take care. Thank you.